morning and welcome to the Nerd Herd, where we share what we heard and cover politics from across the country. I'm OG. Tonight we are going to be talking to our guest, Bentley, from the great state of Indiana. We will be discussing redistricting and the ongoing efforts to do away with DEI, as well as efforts to redo the budget. Um, so let's get into it. Bentley, welcome to the panel, or welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, no, usually it's the panel, but tonight it's YouTube. So we're all good. We're all good.
That's right. I'm fighting with my puppy dog right at the moment.
Oh, I get it. Now our kids are we're trying to get the kids to bed, and you know how that goes. So, um, yeah.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry.
so tell me about the. I want to start off with asking you about the recently elected governor and lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor seems to be quite a character.
That is a really polite way of putting it. Yeah. So, um, Micah Beckwith is his name, and he seems to be a fringe far right. I would call him um, a Christian nationalist, but he wouldn't describe himself that way. He is constantly in the news making all kinds of different inflammatory statements. We had a church recently in Indy that has taken the position that members of the LGBT community should be put to death. And Micah Beckwith's Twitter page actually retweeted something from one of their pastors, and it was up for several days. And then one of his staffers got wise to what was happening and took it down, and he said he has no association with them. He's called, transgender people, severely mentally ill. And he's just an all around kind of, uh, I would describe him as not a great guy. But I think he's really par for the course for the kind of MAGA movement that's taking place in Indiana politics, which is surprising but not surprising. We are a pretty red state, but we're known for we're the state's Hoosier hospitality. So we really, have a pretty moderate Republican, um, legislator. But over the last couple years, it's gotten to be a little more far right than is to the liking of many people. And I think Beckwith was just a choice by Brown to kind of um, get the MAGA people in line, because he didn't have a lot of experience running for governor. He was senator for just, I think, a couple years in his first term. He had ran a business for a while, and when he decided to run for governor, his name recognition wasn't typical for Indiana politics. Um, so I think he used Beckwith, who is very outspoken, to kind of pander to that part of the Republican Party.
Yeah, one of the more interesting comments I read that he made is Democrats have a Jezebel spirit.
Which whatever that even means, and even a majority of Democrats in this country, identify with some kind of, religious background, and especially Democrats in Indiana. So, and I think he just says whatever he thinks is going to get him a headline. Because I think Beckwith himself is gearing up to do something else in politics. I don't think he even will finish out his lieutenant governor term if something becomes available. I think he'll jump at the first opportunity.
So, from what I understand, you are embroiled in a redistricting fight as well. in
We are.
Indiana?
We are. So the vice president of the country came to Indiana to meet with Republican leadership a little over a month ago. They had a closed door meeting, no press. And where it stands right now is that there are a lot of Republicans, like I said, moderate. We do still have a large number of moderate Republicans in Indiana who are very against the idea because, you know, Indiana is red and it just is. We're about, 38-40% Democrat. Um, but our districts, we have 9 of them, are all within about 2. I think the largest discrepancy is there's one district that has like 6 more voters than another district. So, I mean, when they did the redistricting plan originally from the census, I mean, all of our congressional districts are about the same size, up to 2 voters. So they really did it as evenly and as fairly as possible. And, there are a lot of Republicans who worked really hard to make it fair and are vastly opposed to that idea that we need to redo it. And also, there's no way a Republican will win Marion County. Indianapolis is the 11th largest, I believe, at last tally, 11th largest city in America. We have, 800 some thousand people that live there. And it's always going to be run by a Democrat. And then the other Democratic district is up in Gary, near Chicago, like right across the border from Chicago. And they'll have a very tough time making that a red district anyway. And the worry has been from Republicans is if they do the federal redistricting, they're also going to have to redistrict the state house. And there were a lot of very competitive state house districts that Republicans won that they would have to redo if they're redoing congressional districts. So there was a worry that they don't want to do this. And our governor at current is still mulling it over because our legislator only meets twice a year. We're not a full-time legislative body in Indiana. So he would have to call a special session to have a redistricting um, whatever, a redistricting push, and he has yet to call for one. So that indicates to me either there's not enough support for it, or they think, given the climate and how unpopular the president is, even in places like Indiana, that they could lose their supermajority in one of the bodies of our state legislature. So there's been no action on it so far.
One of the more outspoken protesters about this has been Pete Buttigieg.
Yes, he is. He was the mayor of South Bend, which is where Notre Dame is. It's one of our prominent college campuses. He lives in Michigan now, but he is still viewed in Indiana as like one of us. And he has been in the state speaking out against it. He had a I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if it was this last week or the week before. He came to Indianapolis and spoke out against it. Um, it's just I just even if and I try to play devil's advocate sometimes and put myself in a Republican brain space, and I just don't think it would turn out the way that they think it would. I think it would do more harm than good, and I think Pete has been smart in messaging and saying he thinks also that Republicans could decide to do this and it may hurt them as opposed to help them in the state of Indiana. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I would love to see him on a ticket somewhere. I was hopeful he was going to run for the governor of Michigan, where he lives now with his husband and their kids. But he may be gearing up for something different. And, he has a lot of support in a lot of Midwest places, and especially in Indiana.
Awesome. There seems to be a push in the government for anti-DEI legislation. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. And it's just too bad. And the ironic thing to me is that they make it out to be this race issue, and it's really not just a race issue. White women benefit greatly from DEI, and
Mhm.
so to me, it's just I view it a lot as like they do these things because they sound, I mean, the sound bite they get from talking about these things is great, but then in practice it really harms them. And it doesn't just harm them, it harms the whole country. And I think they really need to, they, I think it's the same problem that we were having in the last election, is that the messaging right now on DEI, is, it doesn't sound good, and even to rational people it doesn't sound good. But they're pandering to that 30% of the base that seems to be winning them elections. So, in Indiana, we have done some new legislation, uh, that against DEI, and one of our biggest employers, one of our largest investors, I'm sure you've heard of them, Eli Lilly, has done a
Mhm.
huge, has always been based in Indiana. They're building a new tens of millions of dollar plant to develop obesity drug and a diabetic drug. And instead of building that in Indiana, they've decided to move it to Houston, Texas. And so we're seeing these policies have a real effect on Indiana's economy. And when it starts to affect people's bottom line, there's going to be some problems. And even in places where anti DEI is popular, we lost a huge investment. I mean, it was upwards of like $60 million. They're going to build this plant to make new medicine, and we didn't get it. And that company is based here. They've always been here. That's where Eli Lilly has always been. And due to the climate that is being created in Indiana, they're going elsewhere, and that sucks for us. You're from Ohio, any investment we can get in the Midwest is a good thing, and we're losing investment.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're losing investment to the states that don't need it. Texas has enough money pouring into Texas. There's enough money in those places, and places like Indiana, where our economies are smaller, we're creating these laws that make it not a fun place for businesses to do business, and they're building elsewhere, and it just sucks.
Well, I don't understand. If you're moving away from anti-DEI and you're going from Indiana to Texas, that's kind of like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
Right, but I mean, they are. My thinking with that was, they're going to Houston, and Houston has its own ordinances, and it's a very democratic area, and they're building it within the confines of Houston. So, um,
True.
yeah. So, but I mean, it just these are going to have real world consequences for regular people. It's the, this is off topic, but the farmers with the tariffs. I mean, in Indiana right now, I mean, most of our crops planted this year were soybeans. We have nobody to sell them to. Some of these, these farmers are panicking because most of their soybean sales go to China. China's not buying any of our soybeans. So where are these soybeans going to go? Where are we supposed to send them off to? I mean, they voted for I am understanding that they voted for this, and sometimes you got to FAFO, but this hurts everyone. It hurts me. I work in food service. If farmers don't have money to come spend at the restaurant, I'm not going to be making the same amount of money. So it affects everyone when these policies actually trickle down into our lives, and it's terrible. I mean, it's just a really sad state of affairs.
Exactly. Um, Tell me about the budget and the physical matters that the legislative body is tackling.
Can you elaborate a little bit with that? There is, I mean, there's just been so many moving parts in the last week, I guess.
Just give me a overall general idea.
Um, so from what I understand, um, they don't have the votes right now to continue to fund the government. Democrats are, somehow Chuck Schumer has grown a backbone in the last week and a half, and has said, unless we get some concessions on Medicaid and Medicare that you guys have gutted, we're going to be no's on a continuing resolution to fund the government. And Donald Trump has been unwilling. Mike Johnson, I think is willing to make some concessions. I think John Thune is willing to make some concessions on the budget. But Donald Trump is telling them, we have control of every branch of the government. We don't need them, not understanding how it works, right? That we don't, you have to get more than, I think at current, don't they have 54 Republicans, they need 6 Democrats to continue to keep
Right.
the government open. And Chuck Schumer, has pulled off a Hail Mary pass and gotten even, John Fetterman to say, no, I'm not going to vote to keep the government open. I don't know. I think, obviously I hope the government doesn't shut down, but I also think that we need to stand strong in our convictions. And this, we're the minority party. It's not our job to introduce legislation. It's our job to hold our line. And if they're not willing to make any kind of concessions, then I don't know. Well, I mean, what do we do? Do we just do what they want? I don't think that's a good look for us either, because I think we've been doing enough of that for the last, how long has he been president? My God, it feels like 4 years, but it's not even been 10 months.
So are they having a fight like this in the Indiana State House as well?
It's been less of a fight because they have in our legislator, it's a super majority. And so really they just kind of get to run over whatever. And unlike in like some places like Texas, all of our people could walk out and there's still going to be a quorum, right? So, if every Democrat walked out, there's still like 70% of the members are still in attendance. But I will say, I live in a rural county, and one of my really good friends who I went to high school with is currently the chair of our Democratic Party, which is, we're not a huge group of people, but I think a lot of what's going on in our state is a lot of community activism. So we're doing things like helping food banks and showing up for, they're building an ice facility in Miami County, that the governor, has worked with Trump. You're gonna use state taxpayer dollars to help rebuild this facility, and we're showing up for protests for that, and making sure people have resources. And so we're really doing it at a very tiny grassroots level because our party, in terms of size and power, has really diminished. Um, our budget sucks. Indiana, we're called the Crossroads of America. They're making all of our major interstates now toll interstates, which is a new thing that will be happening. So I-69, I-40, because he said, we have to, it's for the roads, but we have an $8 billion rainy day fund, that isn't used for anything. We just have $8 billion extra dollars just sitting in a bank account for our state. We can't use that for the roads, but they're going to put toll roads all through all Indiana, that were publicly owned and now will be toll roads. So, I don't get it, but there's not much we can do, I don't think, right now at a state level, outside of just trying to rebuild, uh, you know, our presence in our communities, because there's a lot of communities like mine where we didn't even have an office building for the Democratic Party. We didn't have anything going on there. It wasn't, you can go to every, too, you can live in Appalachia, you'll go downtown someplace and there's a storefront that's like, Dubois County Republicans, and they're visible in their community. And I think that that's how it's going to have to start in places like Indiana, where we're just more visible and we're showing up to places where we can find voters. And right now, I'd like to think that we have a little bit of power, but outside of certain local communities, it's been tough. And I know you're from Ohio, it's just as tough over there. Outside
Yes,
of
yes,
like
it is.
Cleveland and Columbus, it's pretty tough to find. You know,
I live in Southern Ohio. I completely understand.
yeah. But we're hopeful we'll get a good field for the next couple federal elections, and if we get a good enough Democrat, we can win. Joe Donnelly, who was uh, President Biden's ambassador to the Vatican City. He was our senator for a bit. We had a two-term Democratic governor, and Evan Bayh, who was also a senator. Um, but I've made this point in lives with you before. We have to run candidates that look like their districts, that look like the people they represent, and can win. Enough Republican votes in places like Ohio and Indiana, where there's just not enough Democrats, that even if we get every Democrat to show up to the polls, we wouldn't win, right? So we need candidates that are, uh, acceptable enough to moderate Republicans to make them want to vote for them. And
Exactly.
Pete does a great job of that. He was the first member of the LGBTQ community to win a caucus in Iowa. Those Iowa voters aren't, the most progressive liberal people you've ever met in your life. We need to remember that, if we do a better job of candidate selection as Democrats, we can do a better job of winning elections. And I think that is true in places like Indiana and in Ohio.
I agree. I totally agree with that. And we got to get people to run too.
And that's the thing. And, I hope it works out for Sherrod Brown. He's very popular in Ohio. But it feels like, in states like mine and yours, we just run the same 3 Democrats in every statewide election and just hope for the best. Sherrod Brown runs, Evan Bayh ran 5 times. We just, trot out the same people every election and say, well, maybe this is a bad enough year for the Republicans that a Democrat can win. And when we have really, really strong, competent people who can win, who are Democrats who could win elections. So I'm hopeful for the midterms, but again, I feel like every time we've been hopeful lately, it hasn't gone the way we wanted to. So maybe more action is, more action on the ground, and more involvement in local races and in state races can really help us get the infrastructure to win.
Speaking of that, you moved us right into our next point. In Indiana, with the Democrats, there seems to be this ongoing rebuilding of the party. The Democrats don't seem to be gaining any seats in recent elections. I know they have a new leadership in Karen Callan.
Callahan, yep. Karen Callahan, yep. So,
what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's to this broader point, right? Is that we are a state that is a typically pretty trusty red state. We on a weird election year, we can get a Democratic senator, we can get a Democratic governor, but the grassroots Democratic Party in Indiana has been really absent for most of my life. Obama won here in 2008, and it was a shock to everyone because there wasn't a lot of ads about Obama in Indiana. There wasn't yard signs. So there are votes to be had here, and I think that Karen, who I've met a few times, because I'm sort of semi-active in Indiana politics, and I campaigned for Joe Biden and worked on his campaign, and worked on Clinton's campaign in 2016. I got to meet Bill Clinton, and I do some things, and Karen's really good, and her focus has been on in towns like mine, making sure that there is a local party that is meeting its voters, and if that can be something that we can model across the state, I think we have a good chance. But it's also the Speaker of the House in Indiana, or maybe he's the former Speaker. I don't know if they had a change, but Matt Lehman, represents my district in our state house, has ran unopposed, I think, the last 6 elections. Just no Democrat runs against him. And, we have to do a better job of recruiting people to run for office, and then also giving them the resources to, have yard signs, have people go knock on doors, and do the things that are required to win elections. So I'm hopeful. In Indiana, it's going to be, it's the long game. It might take us a decade. It might take us 15 years, but I'm hopeful that, over some time, uh, we can, get more Democrats to be at least in the state house, right? Just a few more of us, that can, maybe take away their supermajority, and things like that. So, it's she's only been our leader for a little over, I believe, a year, and there's been positive signs, and I'm hopeful it can continue. But we do also still need a lot of support from the national party, because with resources and things like that, um, Act Blue and places like that, to make sure we have the money that we can run these campaigns. I think it's really important.
I agree. Um, what do you know about this campaign of billboards? I believe it ran last year. That suggested that Democrats vote for Republicans in the primary.
This is hilarious. Okay, so this happens in Indiana a lot. I have several friends who are hardcore liberals, that are registered Republicans, because in Indiana you have to be registered one or the other, to vote in primaries. You can't go in as a Democrat and change your registration, same day. You have to be registered. So there are a lot of people in Indiana, that will register as a Republican and vote for the more moderate Republican. Because, like I said, sometimes in these races, it's two Republicans in a primary that run against each other, and then in the general election, there's no Democrat that runs against them. So it's really about sometimes picking the better, the better of the Republicans, because there's just not Democrats who run for office. So yeah, you could drive a half an hour down the road and you would see 4 billboards that said, "Are this Republican is less bad. Please register as a Republican to vote for this less bad, uh, less bad candidate." And it's crazy. It's a really, bizarre thing that we have going on in some places of the country.
Uh, that's very interesting. Does that make it difficult for you to decide how many Democrats that you really have in the state?
And that's the thing. It makes this hard because, we're our registration numbers, because normally that's how you figure out, who to go, whose door to go knock on, which areas, to go, canvass in, where to put an office. All of those things are based on, when you look at a map. I'll just explain it in, campaign terms. You get a map and it'll tell you, okay, well, in this quadrant, there's this many Democratic voters, there's this many Republican voters, and this many independent voters. And so that's how you would, know where to go allocate resources to make those make sure those people go vote. But so many people are registered Republicans who aren't Republicans that it makes the job harder of the Democrats to go figure out where their voters are. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It's difficult because you're like, well, like the nearest big town to me is Fort Wayne, which is the second largest city in Indiana. And you'll look at a map of Fort Wayne, you're like, there shouldn't be that many Republican voters in that area, and there isn't. But half of those Democratic voters are registered as Republican because they go vote for the moderate Republican candidate instead of the crazy one, that shows up to the MAGA rallies and shows up to gay pride parades and like with the sign. I mean, we get all kinds of manner of crazy Republican people, that run for office here. So a lot of them, a lot of us Democrats, a lot of us young people register as Republican to go vote for the moderate guy. It's like, okay, well, maybe he won't, try to make homosexuality illegal again. Maybe he'll leave us alone. And it's a very much a survival tactic, I think, for for us as queer people in the state of Indiana, and as young people to go ahead and register as Republicans, because there's just not enough Democrats running. So why register as a Democrat if there's not a Democrat running? So, you know.
Has he told some of these politicians that they're not really Republican?
Right. Well, see, and that's funny though, because there was a case, a person a couple years ago who ran as a Republican and fill out the Republican forms, but he was really a Democrat, and he just put an R by his name so people would vote for him, and he nearly won his election. But they caught on to his game, because his opponent pulled up his previous voting record, because in Indiana you can get that information, and he had voted for like
Right.
the last three Democratic presidents, and they were like, "You're not really a Republican," and he was like, "Shoot, you caught me." I was running as a Republican to try to get votes because Democrats don't win.
That's great.
You know,
Um, Let me see. You have an audit that's either ongoing or upcoming in the state. Do you know anything about that?
yeah, I had some notes on this. Let me pull them up because I like to keep informed at least, um, of what's, even though we don't have any power. Um,
Is this a
yeah,
yearly thing or is this
no. So, there was going to be an audit of the economic development, board, and there was a forensic examination done into the agency, and actually, one of the people on the board resigned, when they found out that there was going to be an audit. He was in, um,
Retro?
the governor's cabinet. One of the cabinet members resigned, and of course they painted out, well, she's going to run for something else. If they redistrict, and she might run for something, but, uh, it's there's a lot of that in our state government. Like our Secretary of State, in his office, he's employed like 15 family members that work under him. So there's a lot of that kind of greasing of the palms that goes on. And, to the credit of, uh, the state house, they're like, there's enough, sane Republicans that were like, something is going afoot here. And so there's been some scrambling at the top of our state to figure out, where all this, money is going. It was an $800,000 contract, that, there's five entities of interest that could be involved in this kind of corruption. And so, it's not surprising, given that, at the top of our state level, there's always been, some nefarious activity, but it is surprising that, uh, there's an audit going on and that something may come of it. And, I'm sure, there will be some excuse making and whatever, but, we don't have a lot of money in our state, and our median income is low. We're farming rural people, and we don't mind paying our taxes, but if we pay our taxes, we want to make sure you're using our money for us. um, it's just too bad. And so hopefully the audit, um, uncovers everything, and voters can make an informed decision on, how to proceed forward. But you just never know, because the audit could come out and say, well, no, nothing's wrong, and there will be people that buy that, which is, again, too bad. But, I mean, even the Republicans grilled the Secretary Diego Morales for hours about why he's employing, his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law was making, hundreds of thousands of dollars working in his office, and he had no qualifications for the position that he has, and they roasted him for an hour and a half, but his brother-in-law still has the job. Diego Morales hadn't apologized, didn't fire anybody. So, it could just all be performative. Who could know?
True.
Republicans like to do that, like, oh yeah, look at us, we're really about, weeding out corruption, and then they do it, and then nobody loses their job and nobody gets in trouble for it. So
There is a free speech lawsuit involving Ball State administration.
yes. Okay. So what happened was one of their directors in the Health and Human Services Department, um, Susan somebody. She has a doctorate. She posted something about Charlie Kirk, um, and she was removed from her job. And it was a post outside of her official capacity, and Ball State decided to let her go. And so she, along with I think it was the ACLU, are suing Ball State, which is a public college funded with taxpayer dollars, and so that's going to be um, a big lawsuit, and she ought to win that lawsuit, I would think, because it wasn't anything. It wasn't hate speech. It wasn't, it was just one of those normals. Like, I feel very terrible for his wife and children, but he wasn't a good guy. It was one of those very like, this is a tragedy. This is awful. But nobody mourns the wicked kind of thing. Um, and I lived in Muncie, which is where Ball State is, when I was in college, and she's a very well-known public figure. She does a lot for the community. She's very well liked, and there have been protests on campus for several days at Ball State, and I think the administration, maybe in a movement to appease, might try to give her job back. And I hopefully she tells them no and continues her lawsuit and gets all the money that she deserves, because it's the environment, and I'm sure you've witnessed this, is that, um, something tragic happens, and people give their opinions, and it seems like when Democrats give their opinions, we're raked over the coals for it, and then Republicans can just say whatever they like to please about anything, like,
Exactly.
what Donald Trump Jr. tweeted after Paul Pelosi was nearly unalived, at his home with a hammer, and he tweeted, when Don Jr. tweeted the picture of the tidy whities and the hammer, and he said he was going to a Paul Pelosi party, or when the former Speaker of the House of Minnesota was attacked at her home and unalived, and Senator Mike Lee from Utah tweeted "Nightmare on Wall Street," like, and this lady tweeted that she felt horrible for the wife and daughter, but she doesn't mourn for Charlie Kirk, like, and she's losing her job, that we pay. I mean, it's not like Ball State pays her salary; we're paying it. The taxpayers are paying it, and it's just, the environment can't get so violent and hostile that we forget that even speech we don't like is still protected. Um, I might not like what the president says. I might not like what Lauren Boebert says, or Marjorie Taylor Greene says, or Laura Loomer says, but they still have every right to say the crazy stuff that they say. You know, um, what's
They
the old
have
time?
every right to they have every right to say this stuff and and not have the government interfere.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What's that old timey saying? I might not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to my death your right to say it. It's very that. I have no problem saying that Laura Loomer should be able to say whatever she wants. I also have no problem saying I think Laura Loomer is a fucking idiot. You know,
Right.
I just, it's free speech is important, and we can't forget that even in tough times. And in times where there's a lot of disagreement and a lot of political violence and a lot of um, dangerous things happening. It's still important that we protect our fundamental First Amendment right to just, say what we think we need to say, as long as it's not violent or hateful.
Um, I've read that there's this increased focus on independent candidates in Indiana.
Yes, 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 yes. So Um, the best example I can give for that is the example of what we've seen kind of work in Utah, right, where their governor is an independent, technically an independent. They run independent, Senate candidates every cycle. In Indiana, uh, people who um, lean left but are independent, I guess, have caught on to this, that it's more digestible for Republicans who are anti-Trump to vote for an independent than to vote for a Democrat. Um, and hey, if it makes it more digestible, then have at it. I'm a Democrat.
Right.
I'm proud to be a Democrat. I will always be a Democrat. Um, I'm not a registered Republican. I'm not a registered independent. I'll never register as a Republican, even if I don't have a Democratic candidate to vote for. Um, but if it makes it more digestible for people who consider themselves Republicans to go and vote for an independent, I'm all right. I am all right with that. I'll mash it up and do a nice, mushy pea salad for you. If it makes it more digestible that we aren't getting these crazy far right Republicans to win elections, then I'm good. I'm good.
No
However,
more
they need it.
Trumplicans.
Yes, exactly right.
Let me ask you a question, because I know you got your finger on the pulse. Are there any upcoming 2026 elections that we need to be watching out for in Indiana?
Yeah. So I think the big one in this cycle, um, redistrict dependent or not, is Frank Mervan's seat, which he's the second Democrat. And they made in the redistricting they did because of the census. They made his district a little more favorable to Republicans. He still won a seat, but by a smaller margin. And that, like I said, that's the Gary area, Chicagoland, as people call it, or and people in Illinois call it Chicagoland. People in Indiana can call it the region. That's going to be the critical one for us, and I think that's where the state party is going to spend the most money, because we in order for the Democrats to take back the House, the Republicans have made it considerably harder, right? With the redistricting in Texas, in Missouri, and other places they're going to consider doing it. We have to hold every seat we have and then also gain, find some seats we can pick up. That Gary seat is going to be really, really important. We have to hold the Gary seat. Um, and it would be cool that it wouldn't be so close, but you just never know. You just never know, because with the last election, there was some worry about Victoria Spartz, who is the only Ukrainian representative in the House of Representatives. She's from Indiana. She's a nut. She's a little goofy, but they redistricted her into a safer district. So I mean, the only place, unless they redistrict, and it's still, even if they redistrict, he is the only Democrat in danger in Indiana, and there's only two of them. So ideally, that's where we'll spend the resources in Indiana. Andre Carson from Indianapolis, who represents the Indianapolis area, he wins by 30 points because Indianapolis is a huge area with a lot of people. It's very urban. And he will always have his seat as long as he wants to have a seat. But the other Democrat could be in some trouble unless the resources are allocated to keep him there. The other election that'll be important. We have a couple big cities that are their mayor elections. Indianapolis, their current mayor has been embroiled in some scandal. And the Republican nearly won the last time because of it. That'll be an important election. And the Democrat from the second largest city, Fort Wayne, which I'd previously mentioned, Tom Henry, he was a prominent businessman. He was a Democrat. He had been mayor for like 30 plus years. He passed away after he won the last election, unfortunately. And the new mayor, Sharon Tucker, She's been doing a great job, but that can get competitive because a lot of, like I said, a lot, in rural places where there's a
Mhm.
city, it's all about name recognition, and people aren't going to recognize your name. So and it's nice to have your two biggest cities be run by Democrats in a very Republican state, so there at least can be some pushback um, when the states try to do these things that hurt businesses like Eli Lilly. Indianapolis can create their own stuff to kind of shield their businesses from the stuff in the state, and Fort Wayne is the same way. So those three elections I think are going to be the most important that happen. And I'm not as in tune as in the southern parts of the state, but I know Evansville, they've got always got some competitive elections going on. Um, and yeah, so Frank Mervan is going to be the important one that'll keep Indiana Democrats up on election night in 2026.
Okay, we'll be watching for it. Um, Bentley, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. It was great to see you in person. We normally just see the picture squares, but it was really cool to get on here and you could see me face to face and to talk politics with you. I always enjoy it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so
You have a
much.
great evening.
Yep, I'll see you here in a little bit.
All right, take
All
care.
right. Yep. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.